State Senator Jason Crowell joining us today on the radio for his weekly legislative report. And Senator, last week we talked about workers' rights and workers' safety and a bill being discussed in the Missouri Senate. I understand that you've worked out a final version of that bill.
We did. This week, Senator Engler and I worked with Jack Goodman from Lawrence County over in southwest Missouri, the sponsor of the bill. And we wanted to strike a better compromise, I guess, as it relates to balancing workers' interests with employers' interests as it relates to workers' compensation, what is covered, what are the parameters that deal with this, and in particular, the specific area of occupational disease, toxic exposure. Those are your mesothelioma cases, your asbestos, silica, benzene poisoning, where a worker may have worked with solvents and never been told by his or her employer what the side effects of those solvents could be, whether they strip floors or whether they work in a foundry and sandblast items off with sand. So what we ultimately came up with is simply that an employer is going to have more skin in the game in workers' compensation now than they've had in the past, so that hopefully we'll narrow that gap between the possible financial calculations an employer makes, which is it's X minus this much to just pay my employees off in workers' compensation, instead of it being X plus what it is to clean up my factory or to clean up my foundry or to provide a safer work environment for my workers. We want to narrow that spread so that in the very, very rare case that an employer makes a calculated decision that it's just easier to pay employees off when they get sick through workers' compensation instead of the more expensive route cleaning up my foundry or factory or providing a safer work environment, that they don't choose the latter, that they go ahead and clean up their foundry, that they go ahead and clean up their factory, and they go ahead and provide a safer work environment. And it's our hope. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but Senator Engler and I feel that the compromise we were able to strike this week is a better balance than where it was last week.
Senator, the Missouri Senate did endorse legislation setting the state's 2012 presidential primary early. The Senate approved an amendment setting the primary 1 week after New Hampshire's, traditionally the first in the nation. Is this significant at all?
It actually is, because Missouri, we're not doing what our national parties, both on the Democratic or on the Republican side, want us to do. So the national parties in Washington, D.C. want to stretch out the presidential primaries. So they have sent out an edict to all the states that both Republicans and Democratic national parties, that we want states to push their primaries out to stretch out the presidential primary selection process. And all the other states, in Missouri in particular, are saying, you know what, we don't get any attention when we have our primary in March, when we have it in April, so we want to move up there around the New Hampshires and the Iowas, because Missouri's a bigger state than both of those. And we don't understand why New Hampshire and Iowa get to set the opening debate about who is and who is not going to be our president in the state of, in this country. So Missouri defied national leaders, national wishes on a bipartisan basis. Both local Republicans and local Democrats said, you know what, we don't give a rip what you say, national party. You go mind your P's and Q's, and we'll do what we think is in the best interest of our particular state. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic as debate and thought process broke out on that bill.
So now that goes over to the House, right?
It goes over to the House now. We don't know if on the House level that they're going to, do what the national parties tell them to do, or if they'll join the Senate in a bipartisan dialogue as we did. But I'm pretty confident, even if the House wants to amend that bill and do what the national party is telling us to do, that the Senate will reject that outright. So we'll either keep our primary where it is, or we're going to move our primary up and be part of the game in selecting our next president.
Senator, one more week until the spring break. What do you say next week? We look back at the first half of the session and how things have gone from your standpoint, okay?
Yeah, I'd love to. And everyone have a great, safe, and wonderful holiday. It looks like we're going to finally get some of this warmer weather. What a crazy week. It snowed on Monday, and now it's, 72 degrees as I drive home.
And we'll take it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And again, that is Missouri State